Hello, welcome to this edition of O'side De-Mystified. I'm your host and District 2 Council Member, Rick Robinson. As we approach the end of 2024 and having completed our elections for national, state, and local representation, we also expressed our votes for a number of initiatives and financial measures. For Oceanside, one of the most impactful votes was whether or not to continue Measure X. In this episode, we will meet with the person responsible for the general oversight of this important funding initiative. When we come back, I'll introduce you to our Assistant City Manager.
KOCT, the voice of North County.
Welcome back, and as promised, this is our Assistant City Manager, Michael Gossman. Michael, welcome.
Thank you, Rick. Happy holidays.
Same to you. Thank you. Hey, our show here is a little bit about educating the public on city staff and the different things we do. So I'd like to start off with, can you tell us a little about yourself, how you came to Oceanside, and what does an Assistant City Manager do?
Great questions. So I moved to Oceanside and assumed the position of Assistant City Manager about 5 years ago. Prior to that, I was in the Bay Area where I worked for a county for 19 years and in various capacities, primarily finance and administration, but also some disaster recovery stuff. Anyway, I've been in Oceanside for 5 years as the Assistant City Manager. The City Manager's office in general is basically responsible for day-to-day operations, implementing all the priorities and strategic initiatives that the council gives us. But really, on a day-to-day basis, it's making sure that the city hums along, provides all the services that the residents of Oceanside need and deserve. And I'm proud that that's my job. Personally, I oversee a few departments, including water utilities, libraries, finance, economic development, and then just city manager operations, moving paper around, making sure that the city council agendas are published and ready to go. So that's what I do. I love it, and I look forward to many more years of doing that.
Good. And I've enjoyed working with you. And I know one of the things that you do and you've been charged with is kind of the oversight of initiative called Measure X, and when that came about. And I know you do regular updates and things like that. And that's really what this episode is about today, is Measure X. And I want to talk a little bit about the history and the future, if you can. Can you remind our audience a little bit about what Measure X is? Maybe somebody saw it on the ballot and they're not really sure what it's about, but can you give us a little history on Measure X?
Yeah, well, you really have to go back to 2018. And in 2018, the voters of Oceanside said, we would like to impose a half-cent sales tax that goes right back into the city. It's a general tax. It can be used on any legal municipal purpose. That's the technical term. But really, the focus was on infrastructure, public safety, homelessness, just bettering the lives of everyday Oceansiders. And that passed, as I said, in 2018. It went into effect in 2019. That half-cent sales tax brings in about between $15 and $20 million a year into the Oceanside budget. And to give you a sense of scale, that's about 10% of the overall general fund budget. So it's a significant amount of funding. And we've been able to do some really amazing things with it and really made Oceanside even better than it was before.
So let me interrupt you.
Sure.
That amount, was that what was projected to, or did it exceed our expectations?
It actually exceeded our expectations. So it just so happens I was looking at some of the original reports that were made to council, and it was anticipated that we would be bringing in about $11 to $12 million a year in revenue, and we have exceeded that, as I said. It ranges year to year, but it's been between 15 to just about $20 million.
So when you talk about a half-cent sales tax, I mean, that's kind of nebulous. If I was spending $100 or something like that, what would that translate into?
It isn't a lot. And a half cent is not a lot. As a matter of fact, even with a half-cent sales tax, Oceanside is still well below the state average for sales tax by cities. What a lot of people don't realize when they see that sales tax line item on their receipt, you'll notice that it's not on what's called essential goods. It's not on diapers. It's not on food. It's not on medicine. It's only on other types of goods, And you see that tax, and let's say you're in a city and that's an 8.25% tax. That city only gets typically 1% of that. The rest goes to the state, goes to the schools, goes to the county, who are all providing great services. I'm not knocking those services, but you'd be misinformed to think that all goes back to the city.
Right.
The beauty of something like Measure X is that half cent is pure, comes right back into the city. And it doesn't matter if you're buying it on Amazon or locally, it's coming back into the city coffers. And that's what's really allowed us to do so much with it.
Right. And I think that's an important thing that some people forget is that it is 100% money that you pay that go to benefit the services that you get here in Oceanside. Now, I heard, and you can verify this for me, that a lot of it comes from our tourist industry.
That's right. I think that's mind blowing to a lot of people. But we hired an economist to look at this during the original ballot initiative for Measure X, and they estimated that just around 65% of Measure X comes from businesses and outside residents, so people who don't live here. So that is a huge boon to the city, and it allows us to take advantage of our thriving tourist economy.
Now, I know you said it's a general tax versus the other thing would be a specific tax.
Correct.
Can you explain why we did a general tax?
Well, the general tax gives a lot more flexibility in terms of what you can spend it on, right? And that doesn't mean that we don't have a great deal about accountability and transparency with where that money goes, because we do. A special purpose tax is limited to a specific thing. Like if you were to do a special purpose tax, this is a tax just for roads, it can only be spent on roads. So it reduces some of that flexibility. Moreover, state law says that a general sales tax, or it's actually technically a transaction and use tax, has to pass by the voters by 50% plus one vote. A special purpose tax would require 2/3 majority to pass. So the bar for a measure to pass is much higher. So you could have, 65% of the people in Oceanside think it's great, we want it, but they didn't get that 2/3. It ain't going to happen. In fact, that just happened in San Clemente with a special purpose tax that they had proposed for beach restoration. It reached about 64%, but didn't hit that 2/3, and it didn't pass.
Yeah, we're going to talk about what we use our money for, but I want people to really be secure in knowing that although it's a general purpose tax, that we have identified specific areas, I won't say things, but areas where we want to spend that money, where we think, but that discussion about where that money goes has come from a number of sources. But we just voted for Measure X. So the first Measure X ballot that we had back in 2018 was for a limited time. Is that right?
Yeah, it was for 7 years. And that started in April of 2019, and it would expire in April of 2026.
So why did we vote now?
Because if we didn't vote now, you can only vote on a sales tax in what's called a general election. So if we didn't do it now in 2024, we would have to wait until November of 2026. Meaning that sales tax would lapse and all of the programs and projects and things that I'm looking forward to talking to you about would just go away because there would not be funding for those. So it was important that we ask the voters before then, is this something that you want to continue? Is it working for you? And in 2018, it passed with roughly 58% of the vote. So well over the 50% plus one. The initiative that we just had is passing with 70% of the vote. So a significant uptick. And I look forward to talking to you a little bit about how those priorities are identified, because I'm careful to not just say not Michael Gossman identifying those priorities. We have resources, and the community really is the one that we want to see identifying those priorities, because at the end of the day, it's their money, and they should be the ones telling us where they want it spent. And
so the next fiscal year, we're actually operating off the old Measure X initiative dollars. And then the next fiscal year, we'll just continue with the new one, which we extended for 10 years. Is that correct? Okay.
Correct.
Okay. Any commentary on why 10 years, or is that...
Well, we dipped our toe, so to speak, and with the 7 years, it was working. Then we went back out and we wanted to ask the community, how's this working for you? And when we went out to the community, we hired a professional, surveyor to go out and ask the right questions, ask as many people as they could, and they asked thousands. And what came back was, yeah, we're really happy with the way the city is managing and being a steward of those funds. We're happy with the difference that we're seeing, and we would like to see this extended. That was what the survey came back and told us. So that gave us a sense that people want to see this going even, to be even more impactful. And in planning, the more impactful you can be, the longer time horizon you have. And so by doing 10 years, it gives us a longer time horizon, more ability to, plan for bigger projects, because not only do we get more money overall from it, it also gives us more of certainty that money is going to come in, and gives us to exploit other opportunities.
Well, I want to get into some of those opportunities, but this is a good place for us to take a short break, and we'll be right back.
All right.
My family relied on public assistance to help provide meals for us. These meals fueled my involvement in theater, which fostered my love for acting. When people are fed, futures are nourished. Join the movement to end hunger at feedingamerica.org/actnow.
Have you ever asked for help yourself?
It's always tough, right?
I always feel like I can solve my own problems, but eventually, you just can't deal with it on your own. Once you take that first step, there's so much support.
Welcome back. And Michael, where we left off was talking a little bit about some of the projects and stuff. So can you give us a brief rundown on currently the projects that we're doing? And then I want to talk a little bit about controls and then future projects.
Sounds great. Yeah. So we are, just to give you a quick rundown, and I want to say that, when we were originally planning for $11-12 million a year, as we'd supposed back in 2018, and now it's more than that, we've been able to expand the list of projects and programs that we've been able to implement, and that's really exciting. So right now, we'll start with public safety. We've added an additional homeless outreach team. We had a homeless outreach team before. Now we have two. That includes officers and a social worker, so they can go out there and help people who are homeless and struggling with homelessness get the resources they need to get off the street and into a more permanent housing situation. So we've got that. We've got a downtown crime enhancement or enforcement team that we use overtime. So we're not hiring new officers. We're using an overtime budget to focus on areas where we have a significant crime problem, or we had a significant crime problem, and we're deploying officers there, and that's been working. We are also wanted to take advantage of opportunities from technology and innovations. So both our police and fire get a sort of an equipment and technology budget that allows them to do things like deploy cameras or new equipment for our firefighters, so that they can do the best that they can to protect the lives of Oceansiders.
I know it was helpful with their drone program, getting that started, the funding for that.
Yeah.
For not only the fireside, but also lifeguards use drones now.
Absolutely. What was really impactful to a lot of folks to realize that during the pier fire that occurred in April, a lot of the resources that we used, including the saws to cut the trench in the pier, which ultimately stopped it, that was funded by Measure X. A lot of the folks that you saw running up and down the pier, those were EMTs that were funded by Measure X. Because before Measure X, we didn't have an EMT program, and we didn't have a sole paramedic program. Our firefighters are paramedics, but we didn't have a paramedic program. And now with Measure X, we do. So that's another thing that we're funding. We've also been able to repave over 500 lane miles of roads all throughout the city. And I'm sure you've seen the impact of that. You see it on Oceanside Boulevard, just recently on Cassidy. You're seeing it all throughout the city, really making huge improvements to our basic infrastructure, which is what people said they wanted to see.
And I just want to clarify on you talked about the paramedic program. We've always had a paramedic system in the city as long as I've been here and as long as there's been paramedics around in the county. But what the EMT program has done is allowed to expand that and get some of those EMTs as an entry level into the paramedic program and hire our local. That's been the target.
It's been
locally.
A great pipeline. Yes.
Yeah. So that was part of the reason, not just to add another program, but to actually invest in the community. There's an investment in our community.
Absolutely. These are great jobs. And now we're giving opportunity to local, young people the opportunity to get these jobs and then if discover for themselves if this is something that they want to pursue as a career as a firefighter, and many of them have.
And a lot of people worry about using our tax dollars for salaries, but a small portion really of the entire budget for Measure X, I think it's somewhere around 20% or less, was actually goes to pay for salaries.
That's correct. We really are trying to minimize. So for one, the first Measure X was only 7 years. We didn't want to hire a bunch of people and then have to lay them off if that were to expire and the residents decided not to renew it. And moreover, my belief and the best practice is when you invest in infrastructure, when you invest in roads, when you invest in a new peer view bridge, when you invest in a new fire station, when you invest in that base level of infrastructure, you're no longer having to patch it up with general fund dollars all the time. And those can then be extended even further for more programming. So you get a lot of leverage off of investing in our infrastructure.
So we've purchased vehicles that needed to be replaced.
Yes.
We built our new fire station one with not complete Measure X dollars, but mostly Measure X dollars.
And I think to that point, it's really important to know that, staff takes seeking every other funding opportunity really seriously. And when you have a tool like Measure X, you're able to go to the federal government, like we did with the Fire Station 1, and say, look, we're investing $14 million into this Fire Station 1. It helps we are mutual aid to Camp Pendleton. Would you like to kick in for that? And they did. They kicked in $3 million to help us fund that program. We were then able to take that $3 million and reinvest it in other Measure X programs. So it's a really great leveraging tool that way. We also built a fire training tower with Measure X, and we continue to find opportunities to invest in our infrastructure. Like you'll notice just south of the band shell, we built a whole new stairway, public bathrooms, things that make everyday people's lives better.
Right. That's why I want to make clear. We talk a lot about fire and police and lifeguards and all the things they get, but really we've also put a lot of money into the roads and infrastructure projects as well.
That's correct. I mean, probably a good 75% of the money goes right into infrastructure because that's the best place to put it in many ways.
So let's talk a minute about controls. How have we as a city set it up so what we say we're going to do, we do? Can you explain the controls behind Measure X?
Yeah. So I think the best control you can ever have in any kind of system is transparency. That is, the public gets to see what you're spending it on and what you're planning to spend it on. The way that we accomplish this is two things. One, we established a citizens oversight committee. Those are members of the community from a diverse set of backgrounds. That includes former police officers. We've got firefighters who live in Oceanside but work for a different fire department. We've got people from the business community. We've got people from the taxpayers groups. Just there to make sure that what we're proposing that we spend that money on is in alignment with the priorities that the community identified, both through comments to their council members, but also through that surveying work that we did and what we said that we would do in the ballot language itself. The COC meets 2 to 3 times a year. We present our spending plans to them, and we ask them to say, okay, is this something that you would support and endorse? And a real quick note on that spending plan, which is different from a budget, because a budget is an annual budget, and we certainly budget Measure X dollars, but a spending plan looks at the entire term of that sales tax. So in the case of the first Measure X, it's 7 years. So we're saying right now, and this can change, but right now we're planning to spend this much money in year 2, this much money in year 3, this much money in year 4, and what we're planning to spend it on. So people have a really good understanding of where that money's going. And I think that was one of the reasons that the San Diego Taxpayers Association, which is by definition a watchdog, actually endorsed renewal of Measure X, and
Right.
said this is a good use of taxpayers' money, and it's because of that transparency and accountability.
And I think we're one of, I don't know if we were the only one, but we're pretty few that gets that recommendation, I believe.
Yeah, there were a few other cities who frankly took the Oceanside playbook of establishing the Citizens Oversight Committee, letting people know what we're going to be spending that money on, and replicate it. And good for them. I don't begrudge that of them at all. I think that's great that we're pioneers and doing the right thing, and that other cities are learning from that and able to do the same thing for their residents that we've been able to do since 2019.
Now, the Citizens Oversight Committee, they are picked how? Do you remember?
Oh, yeah. So the city manager recommends members that apply. So when an opening comes up, people can apply through the clerk's office, and the clerk gets those applications over to the city manager's office. We take a look at them. We say, well, this one seems like this would be a good fit, and we recommend those to the mayor. The mayor then appoints them, and then that is voted on by council.
So if somebody watching this is thinking, oh, I'd like to be part of that, they could contact our city clerk and get an application in for it?
Yes.
That would be on file?
Yes.
Because I know sometimes these openings happen
Yes.
suddenly, and sometimes they're planned, but all of a sudden we're filling a position that maybe the public didn't have time to know about.
Yes, that's a great way to do that, is to contact our clerk's office and get an application and get that application turned in.
Yeah, and I think
It's only 45 pages. It goes through.
no, it's not. It's pretty
not.
simple.
It's 2 pages.
But I think having people with all different backgrounds. You don't have to have a fire department background or a police background or a trades background. Just somebody that cares enough to spend a few hours
Yes.
overseeing, reading some reports, making sure that we, as your elected officials and your city staff, are accountable.
You want to, something that I think is a little maybe surprising to folks, but you also don't have to be a proponent of the sales tax. You could have voted no on Measure X, and I would encourage you to apply because your voice is really important in this. As a matter of fact, there's somebody on there now who is one of the most valuable members in the sense that he provides really good feedback to staff. It's very constructive. And he was not a supporter of the original Measure X, and I value that a great deal and would encourage anyone to apply. It doesn't just have to be because you were a big advocate for Measure X to begin with.
I think that feeds into the transparency. So we talked a little bit about those controls and what we've done in the past. What do we got planned for the future, for our future Measure X? Where can we prognosticate a little bit on where we might go with it?
Yeah. So, a lot of the programming that we're doing, such as the additional homeless outreach team, the crime suppression, the EMT program, the homeless diversion programs, we're not going to back off on those. Those are going to continue. Then we look at the infrastructure projects that we want to go with. And in some cases, what programs we can expand. For instance, we added a youth programming and gang diversion program because we had the funding for it. We'd like to see that continue. But in the future, I'd like to see, we have a pier view bridge. The concrete portion of the pier between Pacific and the wooden portion of the bridge is in dire need of replacement.
Exactly.
It goes back over 100 years. It's literally falling apart. And it needs to be replaced. And that is a huge, huge investment. Now, we've put aside quite a bit of money, but we need to continue to put that money aside from Measure X for that replacement. Also,
what's the target dollar figure you think on that?
I think that is going to be around $40 to $50 million, if not more. So it's a lot of money, but it's so important. And it also houses our lifeguard headquarters. A lot of people don't realize that. They have to have a place to have offices, to organize, and that's where they are. So that's a big project. It's going to be in keeping with the existing aesthetics so that it looks like Oceanside. Also parks, where you have El Corazon, which there's a lot of parkland there to be developed. We've put Measure X money into Park Site 1, and we'd like to continue to see Measure X money go into things like parks. So
we have some things identified, but there's plenty of time for people to get ideas or thoughts in. And we only have a few minutes left because this program goes really quick. If the public has input or questions about spending or if they want to report an issue that they're concerned about, what's the best way for them to do that?
Well, I think you can always contact your council member. That is certainly a good way. If you have questions specific about Measure X, you should contact the city manager's office. I'm certainly happy to answer any questions that are related to how Measure X monies are spent. The other really key thing to keep in mind is that at our budget workshop, which is coming up in April, that will be the first opportunity for staff, me, to present a spending plan for the next year to City Council. They take a look at that spending plan and they take in feedback that they get from the community, and they would give us advised staff on areas where they'd like to see tweaked before we go to the Citizens Oversight Committee for them to give it their blessing. So the budget workshop in April is a great place for people to come and say, this is where I'd like to see funding get spent. But I think those three avenues, one, if you want to advocate for some type of project or program, I think that your city council member is a great person to reach out to. If you have questions about how Measure X monies are being spent or will be spent, contact the city manager's office. And you can always go to our budget workshop to advocate on anything that you'd like to see prioritized by council and by the city.
And I think that's important, is that people do speak up and use, and it's best to go directly to the city. Don't use some public or some other email or something that's a chat room or something, because we don't always see those things.
Yeah.
Bring your ideas to the city.
For my own sanity, I do not troll social media sites looking for ideas.
That's what I was. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So in the last couple of minutes, what's the best way for the public to keep updated? Do we have a website? How can people just, maybe they don't have any input, but they just want to know what's going on?
Yeah, I think that, looking at the Measure X website that we have on the city manager's page, signing up for the Oceanside Tide, there's always Measure X updates in there. And also using our official social media outlets, we really try to communicate. This is the city residents' money. This is their money. They have a right to know where it's being spent, and any opportunity we can to show them with signage or social media outlets, that we want them to know this is where your money's going. It didn't just get absorbed into the general fund. These are things that are meant to better you and better your community.
And I wanted to talk about signage because I've seen a real effort to have more signage out there on projects. So when people see the sign that says this project funded by Measure X, they will know.
Yeah. And, interestingly, that was actually some feedback that we heard from our Citizens Oversight Committee, listened to and acted on, was, hey, we want to see more signage. We want people to know where this money's going. So we really stepped it up. And there's times when I drive around, I live in Oceanside, I drive around, I see a project going, I'm like, where the heck is that sign? And I would call up the city engineer and say, get a sign out there.
Right.
Because I want people to know it's there. It's the right thing to do.
Well, the other right thing for us to do is to end this discussion. So I really appreciate you taking the time to come out and talk about Measure X past and where we're going in the future. And I'm looking forward to working with you to make sure that we get the best bang out of the dollars, the hard-earned dollars that our citizens give us to do this. So thank you.
Well, thank you for having me. Always a pleasure, Rick.
My pleasure.
Know a veteran who needs help? Nation's Finest provides supportive services to veterans and their families who are struggling with housing-related costs. Visit nationsfinest.org or call 1-833-468-9676. That's 1-833-468-9676.
Donating pet food can keep families together. Pets and people belong together. Learn more at petsandpeopletogether.org.
Welcome back. As we close this program, the holiday season is upon us. Our diversity is reflected in how we choose to celebrate, or even if we celebrate at all. The fact that we continue to grow in population, attract new businesses, and a growing tourist economy continues to be a testament to our resiliency through good and difficult times. Your demonstrated faith in your city leaders to be fiscally responsible with your tax dollars through the passing of Measure X is humbly appreciated. I encourage you to watch for continued progress. Stay in contact with your elected representatives. Report areas of concern when you find them. And take time to share the good work you see taking place. May this holiday season be one of peace and enjoyment for you all. Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Kwanzaa, and especially a very Happy New Year. Until next time, I'm your council member, Rick Robinson, and remember that O'side is a great place to live, work, and play. Don't let it be a mystery.